The 8-9 game in the West region is UConn, two-time defending national champion, finding themselves as the 8 seed against number 9 seeded Oklahoma. Oklahoma, of course, we've talked about a bunch. They fell off a lot over the course of the season. They were undefeated, right, in non-conference or had one loss. And then, of course, first year in the SEC. SEC's as loaded as it's ever been, and they slipped up quite a bit. They got themselves to the bubble of the tournament, despite being at one point, like 10th, 12th in the country. UConn, up and down season for their standards, especially over the last few years. Dan Hurley, I thought at one point was maybe going to just quit. I don't know. He was just losing his mind. But this is a weird game to me. I don't love UConn, of course. I don't love the guard group that they have. Obviously, having McNeely back and Caravan's been shooting it a little bit better. I've actually seen some shots of his go in recently, which was unusual there for a little bit. He was like 4 for 36 over a stretch in Big East play from behind the arc. And then on the Oklahoma side, they have Spears, one of the most polarizing freshmen that doesn't really get talked about enough, I don't think. He's fully capable of winning a tournament game. So to me, this game's interesting, but at the end of the day, I think it's really just setting up a date to lose to Florida in the second round pretty handily. I don't think either of these teams is really even in the same zip code as Florida.
Yeah, I originally looked at this game and thought UConn was kind of steamroll Oklahoma here. I was kind of just looking to fade Oklahoma in general. We've kind of had this team on fraud watch all year long, but the more I looked at it, I did see some paths for Oklahoma, especially on the offensive end, to have success against UConn. And it starts with the guard play led by Jeremiah Fears, and they just have a lot of different guards in this team that could beat UConn's suspect perimeter and dribble defense off the bounce. Like Fears is probably going to be guarded by Hassan Diarra, but outside of that, guys like Duke Miles, Kobe Elvis, even Forsyth off the bench, and Goodine, like all those guys can win off the bounce against a slower footed perimeter of UConn. So I think isolation's not like the play type to live out of, but I think they can kind of get whatever they want there because UConn forces a lot of isolation. They don't like to send help. They don't really they want defenders to kind of guard their yard, but they don't really have great defenders to do that. They try to limit spot up attempts, which Oklahoma is really good out of the spot up game, and UConn can kind of cut that off to an extent. But I do think the dribble creation of Oklahoma can have real advantages in this game. But UConn on the offensive end should live on the offensive glass. Like Oklahoma can't rebound on either end. They have been a little bit better. And I think Wagi for Oklahoma is an upgrade, especially on the defensive end over Sam Godwin. Not really sure if we're going to get Godwin here or not, but he would help on the offensive glass. That's not really where they create any value anyway. But Wagi, he was really good in the SEC tournament. And I think he can provide at least some rim protection as opposed to Sam Godwin, who's been a very poor rim protector. And I think he's been a lot of the issue for this defense. Oklahoma's perimeter defense isn't all that great either, but UConn kind of lives in their secondary actions, scoring off screens, scoring in the handoff game. But so overall, I do think both offenses have advantages. Oklahoma can turn them over a little bit. They're 111th nationally in turnover rate defense, and we've seen pressure defenses really affect UConn, and they're 174th in turnover rate on the offensive end. I don't even think that's like reflective of how poor their ball security is. Like I've talked about countless times, like there are a lot of teams in the Big East that play conservative style defenses, and the three teams that get after you in Seton Hall, St. John's, and Marquette turn them over at an insane clip. So if they're going to play any team with any sort of ball pressure, I think that can give UConn quite a few issues. So I kind of see this game as more of a coin flip as opposed to UConn kind of rolling into the next round. But overall, I'm just not very high on Oklahoma, even though they do have advantages. And I wouldn't be surprised either way. But for the sake of making a pick, I will take UConn just because I think they're the better team, probably on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, I like UConn side as well. I think your point about them on the glass is massive. I mean, Oklahoma's in the bottom third in the country in defensive rebound rate, and UConn in the top 25 in offensive rebound rate. I would expect like Taris Reed, Samson Johnson to be able to get all over the glass. Even some of the guards, like maybe Caravan, flies in there for some offensive rebounds. I just think they're going to be able to overwhelm them there. One thing about Oklahoma, though, on the offensive end, they do get to the line quite a bit. And UConn actually fouls quite a bit. I mean, their free throw rate defensively is in the bottom 32 in the country. They're 332nd in free throw rate allowed. So maybe this is an angle where Oklahoma, if they're not getting defensive rebounds, like maybe they can make up for it by getting to the line a bunch and getting Taris Reed in foul trouble, getting Samson Johnson in foul trouble. Because I'm not like super high on UConn's like perimeter defenders. They're okay, but it's not the same athletic group that they've had in the past with guys like Andre Jackson and some of those other guys they've had over the last few years. It's a bit of a different group, so maybe these Oklahoma guards can get downhill, draw some fouls on some of those big guys, like trying to get a bunch of block shots, which UConn appears to be pretty susceptible to, and Oklahoma obviously very successful at drawing fouls. So maybe that's an angle where Oklahoma can pick up some 3 points and stay in this game, and then ultimately get UConn off the offensive glass by getting those guys to the bench.
Yeah, I think that's pretty key. And like a lot of it comes off of just beating these guards off the dribble and forcing their hand, either forcing UConn to rotate on defense more than they want to, or,
Right.
just hack them to avoid them from getting to the rim. So I do think there's a real chance Oklahoma wins this game. I do view this as more of a coin flip. The spread is sitting at like 4.5, and obviously always going to have to bet on a premium for UConn. And I mean,
Just
the
UConn
projected
juice.
spread.
It's just some UConn juice, right? I mean, it's just UConn,
yeah.
UConn tax.
Yeah, and these teams, like, I mean, Torvik has this as a 1.5 point spread. It's sitting at 4.5. Like, yeah, just the price you got to pay. I mean, it's a team that's earned its respect, and they're really good in the tournament setting. Obviously, like, I really do trust like good half court offenses in March, because the game does slow down a ton. But both of these teams do have really good half court offenses. So yeah, I see this game as a coin flip, and I'll just take UConn for the experience. I don't really like using that angle at all, but I do trust their half court offense just a little bit more.
Yeah, this should be a good game. Like I said, whoever wins this game likely going on to lose to Florida anyway, but should be a close game. I'm going to side with UConn as well to win this game, but wouldn't at all be surprised if Oklahoma does win. But I actually expect them to cover this spread. So we'll say UConn wins, maybe Oklahoma wins and likely covers, but expect them to lose to the Gators in the second round.